So about 2 weeks from the filming of this video, Joseph Parker will be stepping into the ring again, this time to fight American southpaw Jason Bergman. Now, I did a video when the news initially broke that he would be fighting Jason Bergman, and I did promise to do a follow-up video when I'd had time to look at him and to check out some more of his back catalogue. Let's start with the BoxRec stuff. You know, Bergman's got 11 losses on his record. I think he's got 25 victories. 4 of the 11 losses have come by KO. Now, to give you an example of a few names he's lost to by KO, Nagy Aguilera, I think he stopped him in 1. Bowie Tapu, I think stopped him in 2. Seth Mitchell stopped him in 5. Perhaps even more worryingly than that, he was recently outboxed by Maurice Harris over a 6-rounder. You know, Maurice Harris beat him on points. This is the same Maurice Harris who was recently destroyed in 1 by Kubrat Pulev. Yeah, so his BoxRec isn't looking too good. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Joseph Parker, he's not world level yet, but there aren't too many fighters out there with 11 losses on their record I'd pick over him. You know, he's one of the handiest prospects in the sport. And when you see a guy coming against him with 11 losses, you start to worry for the guy's health and safety, especially when you factor in that the guy's been stopped in the first round before. Now, I've had a look at Bergman. I've watched him fight. He seems to be a relatively big guy. I guess that's the first thing to say. I don't know the stats. There aren't stats listed for him. I don't know how tall he is or how big he is, but we're talking about a big man here. I'm guessing he's between 6'3" and 6'6" in terms of height. I'm guessing he's in excess of 240 pounds. He's a big lump, big solid guy. He's a southpaw. Now, I think Parker's handlers talked a lot about getting experience with a southpaw when they fought, when they picked Jason Bergman as an opponent. And I agree, it is beneficial to get experience for a young prospect of fighting a southpaw. What I would say is when a fighter is very limited, when you've got a D-class fighter versus an A-class fighter, I'm not 100% sure the fact he's a southpaw makes such a big difference. You know, if you've got an A-class fighter versus a B-class fighter, then the southpaw can add a new dynamic. You know, it can be something different. It can be a test. But when you're dealing with someone who is essentially a very limited fighter in Jason Bergman, I do wonder how much the southpaw stance is actually going to cause Joseph Parker problems here. Now, Bergman, I've seen some footage of him which does suggest he carries big power. I guess he's a big lump, and I guess if you stand there with your chin in the air and allow him to hit you, there's always a risk. But let's be honest, Bergman's not really defeated any opponents of great note. I did see he had a win against Julius Long on his record, which is, form at a certain level. But it's all very well and good knocking out some sort of journeyman with a losing record. Does Bergman have power at a more elite level, at a top 50 heavyweight level? I don't think so personally. If you look at his punches, he kind of pushes them out. They're slightly laboured. There's not much snap in them. There's not much speed in them. You know, clearly he's a big guy. Big guys are often naturally heavy-handed. But I don't see him having the same kind of explosive power as Joseph Parker. You know, I don't see him having enough power to sort of change the course of a fight with a single punch like Joseph Parker could do. Bergman's footwork is slow, it's plodding, it's basic. He kind of circles slowly. He's there to be outboxed, he's there to be outmaneuvered. And to be honest, I think that is going to be the biggest dynamic between these two, is actually the speed and how dynamic the movement is. You know, Parker is the kind of guy who can box rings around Bergman if he chooses to. He's got a natural athleticism. He's got a decent amateur pedigree. He's got good footwork. And I think really I'd like to see Parker not take a single punch back in this fight. You know, and I know that's a strong comment against a big opponent, but I really mean that. Bergman's punches are slow and, as I say, kind of laboured. I would like to think, he kind of pushes out this jab, like really sort of laboured. I would like to think a younger guy at the top of his game like Joseph Parker will be able to have the head movement and the foot movement to stay on the outside and simply just move away and anticipate every time a punch is coming towards him. I think he should be able to do that against an opponent like Bergman. I'd like to see him circling on the outside, waiting till Bergman commits. And when Bergman commits with that sort of slow footwork and slow jab, I'd like to see Parker close the gap instantly. Have the footwork to shuffle in like instantly, and then literally be able to explode on Bergman on the inside. I made a video ahead of Joseph Parker fighting Daniel Martz where I said I'd be very surprised if we heard the second bell in this fight. Now, let me say, Bergman might be a slightly better operator than Daniel Martz, but if I had to pick a round, once again, I'd be picking a first-round knockout for Joseph Parker here. This guy is not in the same level as him. This guy not only has never beaten anyone like Joseph Parker, but he's lost every single time he stepped up to anyone remotely in the same class as Joseph Parker. We saw what Parker did to Bowie Tupu. Well, look at what Bowie Tupu did to Jason Bergman, and I think that kind of tells the story. Now, I know styles make fights. It's not as simple as, Parker beat Bowie beat this guy, therefore Parker beats Bergman. It's not as simple as that in boxing. Different styles can cause different problems to different fighters, and we could see a different result here. But having sat down and watched the guy, I just think that Parker is in a different league to him. I really do. I think Parker is going to have the ability to box rings around him, and the fight for me ends whenever Parker wants it to end. Because I think as soon as Parker unloads the heavy artillery, the guy goes. I think it's as simple as that. Simple as that. It's one of those. I remember watching UK boxing fans and global boxing fans may remember when David Haye fought Audley Harrison, and David Haye basically decided not to knock Audley Harrison out in the first round. There was some suggestion David Haye had bet that he was going to knock him out in a later round, actually, which is why it happened. But David Haye was so comfortable in there, he just decided to have a look at Audley Harrison for a round or two, and then basically decided he'd had enough, clicked his fingers, and the fight was over. I would like to see Parker equally as in control of Bergman as David Haye was of Audley Harrison that night. I think it's comparable, the gap in class. One thing that's key for Parker, and Parker is becoming, one of the most exciting prospects in the heavyweight division. He really is. He really is. All these video footage that's emerging of him is very exciting. And to New Zealand boxing fans, I would let you know that Parker's becoming more and more talked about in the UK. Regular viewers to my channel will know that I've been talking about him for a long time now. A long time covering his much earlier fights. But Joseph Parker's been appearing on Sky Sports here. There's been articles circulating about Joseph Parker versus Anthony Joshua in the future. This guy is getting recognition over here in the UK, and that's a real good thing. But the one slight area of concern for me with Joseph Parker is defensively. He's got to. There's been times he's put in very disciplined performances, textbook performances, and there's been times he's been ever so slightly sloppy and allowed guys to hit him. Now, getting hit in boxing is part of the course. Obviously, you go into a fight with another man. Both men throw punches. You're going to take hits in your professional career. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is when you are such a class above, there's no need to take a risk. Now, I'm not saying this Bergman even has the potential to knock Joseph Parker out. But why risk getting cut? Why risk getting an eye injury? Why risk getting a broken nose? Why risk having something happen in this fight that maybe means Parker can't box in March or box in April? What I want from him is discipline defensively. If he picks his spots, counter punches this guy, waits for this guy to overcommit with his slow punching and his slow movement, he can end the fight whenever he wishes. But fundamentally, he's in there with a big man. There's just, and I say this regularly, it's probably getting boring to regular viewers of the Parker videos, but I just want to see discipline. We know Joseph Parker carries huge power, huge hand speed. None of us will be disappointed if this gets to a second round. There's just no point in, you want to see disciplined defensive performances. And I think if he can master that against a decent level of opposition, there really is a bright future ahead for Joseph Parker. If you're a Joseph Parker fan, please subscribe to the channel. I'll certainly do a video covering the fight when it's on, and I'll be very interested to discuss, the fight after it's happened. Also, it's going to be fascinating, assuming he takes care of Bergman as I expected him to. It's going to be fascinating what level of opposition he goes in with. As I've said before, Parker's actually fought a better level of opposition in the past. Daniel Marks, Bergman, big step down in opposition. Now, I'm not saying he needs to go and fight a top 10 fighter next, far from it. He's young, he's got plenty of time. But perhaps it would be nice to see him fight someone a few places higher than Bergman and Daniel Marks next time he steps into the pro ring. Let me know your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this video, do give me the thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Many thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the post-fight coverage of Parker versus Bergman. Thanks for watching.